Yes, Abhinav. Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Yeah. Good evening, all. So we have in the session 30 participants, and we have our speaker also with us. So Nitin, I think we can wait for another 5 minutes more if you do not mind. I think in the meanwhile, we may get another 30 or 40 students more, and that will become a good enough strength to start with the session. I hope you don't mind that.
It's okay, Rajiv.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Rajiv, maybe we can start now, and I will share the presentation and all the details with you so that maybe you can share it among the students later.
Yes, I'll just get a confirmation from the HOD. Just give me 2 minutes.
Yes,
I'll just
yes,
then we'll
sure,
start.
sure.
Yeah. We have a good participation strength
Yes,
now.
yes,
It's 40, so I think that's
yeah,
good enough to start with.
yeah,
I'll just check
yeah.
in with you. So as it is 4:15, I think we can start without further delay. I am yet to connect to HOD. I think sir is a bit busy with some meeting, but nonetheless, he has given us the confirmation that we can go ahead with. So good evening, everyone. I'm Rajiv, assistant professor from School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada, and we have with us Nitin Davis as our key speaker for the day. Before I introduce him, I'll introduce the event to all of you, what we are celebrating today. And so, good evening, all. We are awaiting our director, head, etc. But nonetheless, I'll go ahead with welcoming all, and then we'll start with the event. So, good evening to all who have assembled here. I thank Director of SPA Vijayawada for supporting the cause of organizing this Urban October at SPA V 2021. Also, I thank Head Department of Planning for conceiving this idea of taking up this Urban October 2021 at SPAV. I welcome all the faculty who have joined this session and all students also who have actively participated in the competitions that we floated as a part of Urban October, painting competitions, essay writing competition, and we have the video making competition, and the participants who have joined today for this particular webinar. So about October, just to start with, Urban UN Habitat is celebrating Urban October as a month of very exciting discussions and events to focus the world's attention on urban issues and sustainable development. In this line, individuals, organizations, cities, communities, and governments at every level are encouraged to take part in various activities world over. SPA Vijayawada, being an institute of national importance and a premier institute in the field of architecture and planning education, is also organizing Urban October at SPAV 2021 to highlight the challenges and solutions relating to cities, towns, and communities, and to make our students, the budding planners and architects who have joined us today, our future city builders, aware about the need for sustainable development. So under this Urban October 2021, which SPA Vijayawada is celebrating, we are celebrating World Habitat Day, World Architecture Day, World Cities Day, and World Town Planning Day. So all these days put together, we have put under the Urban October 2021, which SPA Vijayawada is celebrating. Yes, it's been, we have just entered into November, but this program we have planned for October, but because we had our exams, etc., it got a bit extended into November. So the last date for all the celebrations will be 8th of November, which is World Town Planning Day. The entire range of events that we have planned under Urban October at SPAV 2021 aims to bring together students of architecture and planning professionals at various stages of their career. So today we have with us a young planning professionals who are at the early stages of their career, academicians and researchers to think and deliberate on sustainable development. So in line with this theme of World Habitat Day for 2021, that is accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world, and World Cities Day 2021 on adapting cities for climate resilience, we have planned the webinar, which is titled Low Carbon Futures, which will be kind of putting together both these ideas of what World Cities Day, which was just yesterday. So that is what we are trying to put across through this webinar titled Low Carbon Futures. So just to introduce quickly our key speaker for the day, who is a very young planner who is doing pretty very well in the field of planning these days. So we have with us Nitin Davis. He is a civil engineer turned environmental planner, and he started his career at Environment and Water Resource Engineering Division of IIT Madras after BTech. And then after he did his environmental planning from SPA Delhi and was working with the climate change team of an NGO called Tanal in Wayanad in Kerala on a pilot study on carbon neutral development at a panchayat level. And further, he joined State Disaster Management Authority of Kerala in January 2018. So, as a hazard analyst, which was his position there at the State Emergency Operations Center, he was responsible for the emergency operation during the Kerala floods of 2018 and 2019. And he has worked on vulnerability assessments and post-disaster recovery initiatives of Rebuild Kerala initiative till January 2020. Presently, he is working with the climate change team of German Development Agency GIZ India on the project titled Strategic Partnerships for the Implementation of the Paris Agreement, funded by the European Union and German Environment Ministry. So that's a quick bio of Nidhin. There is more to tell about him. So anyways, over to you, Nidhin, and I welcome you for the event.
Thank you so much, Rajivata, for that wonderful introduction and for giving us a context of Urban October. And good evening to all of you. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And I am in middle of some field mission. That's why I'm joining from Raipur in Chhattisgarh, where we are supporting the government in revising their state action plan on climate change as part of this EU's PIPA project that Rajiv has mentioned. So the title for the session is Low Carbon Futures. So as planners, we always talk about a future, a long-term plan, and a master plans and all. But maybe I will start with. I have a couple of slides. If you don't mind, I'll just share my screen. Rajata, Rajiv.
Yes, please. Yes, please. You can share
Yeah.
your screen. There's no problem.
Uh, yes. So I'll just share my entire screen and just show the PPT. I hope it is visible.
Yes, it is visible. Yeah.
Yes. So let us talk about the present day scenario. Like as we talk today, the climate change issues and extreme weather events like disasters have become so common. What was the scenario like 5 years ago or 6 years ago when we, let's say in 2015 or 2016? Uh, as we progressed in terms of development, as we progressed in terms of lot of other aspects, are we on a sustainable path is something that we should really introspect. So we have been listening to this word a lot. While I joined in 2018 the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority, I was not aware of such a department at the state government level. But now every one of us are well aware of all these terms: hazards, disasters, heat wave, floods, coastal floods. Even the COVID-19 health emergency has some linkages with the ecosystem devastation that is happening, and all those genetic resources are coming from ecosystem devastations, and that has also linked with the kind of development that we were doing in the business as usual scenario right after the industrial revolution. So all these cyclonic events, landslides, and the extreme weather events that we were witnessing in many parts of the country are as a result of the climate change. So recently, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) released the assessment report of six, which gives us the scientific insights on the present state of the global climate system and where do we stand and where are we going ahead. Just let me pause for a moment. One second. Sorry for that interruption. The IPCC gives us a clear scientific warning about the future climatic disaster or the climatic crisis that we are seeing now, which is unfolding. So I'll just talk about the India-specific projections for in terms of the temperature and in terms of the rainfall projections for the future. Looking at the concentration pathways, RCP scenarios for the short term and for the long term, that is 2050, we are going to witness more extreme temperature and more extreme rainfall patterns across the country. And there are more vulnerable areas in the many parts of the state. And I think we have a very mixed audience from the different parts of the, uh, so we can easily relate to it, the changes that we have seen in the last 5 years or 6 years. And it's going to, the clear warning is that it's going to increase with further warming. So moving ahead, it's the kind of projections for the temperature scenario, and this is the kind of projections in the rainfall scenario based on the historical data, historical trend. So how are these extreme weather events are climate change is related? So as the global average temperature increases, the kind of changes happening the wind pattern, the monsoons that we call. So in recently in this year 2020, we experienced an extreme rainfall event in Kerala, which is like in the last couple of weeks in certain parts in the Western Ghats. So, how does the wind pattern influence rain is something that is very basic understanding for each of us. But the changes in the global climatic systems is disturbing the kind of balance in the global atmosphere. So, the recently we have been listening to the more frequent cyclonic events in the both Arabian Sea and both Bay of Bengal. it's kind of an representation. And other events like landslides and the floods. Floods are like different uh, types of floods and kind of impacts that we have seen. So let's talk about the extreme weather events, the kind of disasters that causes more damage to our life and property are basically the unpredictable rainfall pattern that we have seen in the recent years. So rainfall pattern, when we talk about the rainfall data and the rainfall pattern, the kind of changes that we have seen is that uh, we are getting more amount of rainfall in a very short duration of time. So if you take the annual average or if you take the daily average, there is no much of a difference in the last 5 or 10 years. And even, but the kind of changes in the pattern that we have seen is really shocking kind of a feeling, because the kind of torrential rainfall happening for a very short period of time is causing more damage than a kind of a consistent rainfall that used to have during the monsoons. And it's going extreme. And if it is a summer, it's an extreme summer. If it rain, it's extreme rain. If it is winter, it's extreme winter. And that's something is some really difficult to adapt. And the kind of impacts these kind of unpredictable weather patterns creating on the livelihoods of the normal people and even the agriculture sector is huge if you look at the loss and damage data. But we are, as human beings, we are able to cope up with most of these extreme weather events. But for other living beings, it's really difficult to adapt or difficult to mitigate the impacts. So, as I said, the increased frequency of the cyclonic activities and the secondary events, maybe we can say the outbreaks of these zoonotic diseases or the drinking water shortage can also be linked with the climate event as an impact. So this is the kind of CO2 emissions or the GHG emissions that we have seen in a global level from the developed countries, and who like we also have a kind of a carbon footprint concept. That's how much as a person that I am contributing. I'll come to that in the later slides. So it's not just India or it's not just any particular state in India. It's all around the world. We have seen the news in the extreme flood events in Germany, California forest fires, be it Australian bushfires, or the kind of disasters that's happening all around the world. But the South Asian countries are more vulnerable to climate change, and being in India, the peninsular region in India, are seeing more increased events of climatic disasters. So this is what I was mentioning too, that as people or as human beings, the 90% of the world population, around 700 million people, are exposed to, will be exposed to heat waves. So I'll just explain the context here once more. So the global average temperature rise or the global warming is something that we take the quantitative indicator for climate change. So we have already experienced or we have already witnessed around 1.2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. And the Paris Agreement that we signed in, that the world leaders have committed to in 2015, aspire to limit this global average rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But as the business as usual scenario suggests, the projections scenario suggests it will go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we are comparing how the impacts will be if the global average temperature is 1.5 degrees Celsius versus if the temperature rise is 2 degrees Celsius. So it will be more catastrophic to the other living beings. Let's say the other species that will go extinct, and the kind of sea level rise that we are going to see, the kind of depletion in the coral reefs, or the kind of impact that will going to have in the agriculture sector. There are a lot of thermosensitive crops, and even the paddy, even the main staple crops like paddy and wheat are very climate sensitive. So the coastal regions are also in the vulnerable region, and even in the species are also very much vulnerable to this temperature rise. So just to give a basic understanding of this greenhouse effect and the global warming, like what we call the greenhouse effect is the kind of warming, the kind of umbrella that keeps our Earth warm, which supports the life. which is very much necessary. But on the other side, the enhanced kind of an greenhouse effect, which causes by the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that as human beings we produce after before because of the burning of fossil fuels and other activities. So, how does this disturbance happen in the natural carbon cycle is something that we have to look at. And so there was a natural system to remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through photosynthesis, be it organic carbon in soil or the carbon removal that's happening in the oceans. So these are the major carbon sinks that remove the atmospheric carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So when we talk about greenhouse gases, it's not only carbon dioxide, but methane and nitrous oxide and other HFC gases also. So this was a balanced system, but after the industrial revolution, when we started the kind of development that we have seen today, it's become a very unbalanced system. I'll come to a slide, or I'll come to the specific areas where the role of planners will come, and maybe as an individual, let's talk about as an individual how huge is our carbon footprint, like how much are we contributing to climate change, or what is our role in all this dialogue. uh, so we have seen this cycle, we have seen this fact of anthropogenic greenhouse effect. So let's come to the kind of accounting part of all the carbon footprint or the emissions. So, as I said, there are three different types of carbon removals or the greenhouse gas emissions that is happening by the removals in forest and plantations through the photosynthesis process. And the ocean is the biggest carbon sink in the planet. And the soil has the power to remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it as an organic carbon in the soil. And the emissions mainly happen in four sectors, which is transportation, energy and industries, agriculture, and other land use changes also cause to the emissions. Livestock causes the methane emissions, CH4, which is a major greenhouse gas, and the methane emissions are also happening from the landfills and also from the burning of waste. So these are the major sectors of emission and major sectors of the carbon sequestration that is possible. Uh, so when we talk about the low carbon, so low carbon futures or the low carbon development, so it's a very multidisciplinary, very vast area where we can focus on any of these particular sectors to move towards low carbon futures. So let's take transportation. We can move towards low carbon mobility. That's why we have a lot of debate or a lot of discussions happening over electric mobility. But at the same time, we have to ensure that this electricity is from the clean sources, renewable sources. And so in each sector in industries also, there are a lot of discussions happening towards low carbon industry transitions in cooling sector, in the hard to abate sectors like iron and steel industries or the cement industries. So at the same time, we can also enhance the carbon removals by supporting the carbon sequestration or by enhancing the carbon sinks. Since we all share a single atmosphere, it's nothing that India should only do, or it's nothing that a particular country do. So there is a lot of debate happening between developed countries and developing countries on the global climate change debate. And we always ask for our equitable share of carbon budget because we have, as a country, India cannot shift from fossil fuels so rapidly, or we cannot switch to clean fuels by switching from coal in a very short period of time. That requires a lot of investment. Like moving towards electric mobility is not like very that cannot happen overnight, or that will take a lot of time. So that transition requires a lot of financial support from the developed countries. And that's how this Paris Agreement and the UNFCCs came into the picture, and where they have agreed that each developed country will support the developing countries and the least developed countries in terms of this transition by supporting technologically and by financially. So there is a lot of debate happening on this social inequality sector, and and the most disturbing thing is that the people who are contributing very least to the whole crisis is being more vulnerable at all the climatic disaster events that we have seen in the past. So just to give a graphical representation that after industrial revolution from 1900s and 1950s, that we have all emitted a lot of greenhouse gases which are in the atmosphere, and that's there in the atmosphere, and that's causing the warming or the trapping of and the global average temperature rise is happening. So we have a very limited carbon budget that we are allowed to emit or that we can exploit for until the whole collapse will happen. So we can create artificial carbon sinks by direct air capture or by removing the atmosphere through technologically very financially intensive technologies. And we have the very small portion of natural carbon sinks where we can remove the carbon from the atmosphere. So, as we talk about carbon neutrality or the net zero, I hope the concept is clear now. We have talked about global average temperature rise through global warming, anthropogenic emissions, GHGs, and the carbon footprint. Now we are talking about carbon neutrality. So carbon neutrality means uh, we are not emitting any much more carbon dioxide or any other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we will be following a development pathway which ensures that the kind of emissions that will happen will be sequestered through any carbon offsetting projects. Like if I am calculating my carbon footprint from a project is something to be 1,000 gigatons of carbon, I will ensure that that much of carbon will be removed from the atmosphere. So basically, we will have to, as a country or as a state or as a government, we will have to decouple the GHG emissions from the economic growth, since it's always believed that as we develop, as we grow economically, the GHG emissions are also bound to go on an increasing trend. So we have the international climate change negotiations happening right now at Glasgow. The COP26 has begun already, where they will come in, the countries, the world leaders will meet and they will commit to more enhanced or more ambitious uh, climate change pledges and emission reduction targets. So as India, we also have the NDCs for our as a country, the nationally determined contributions. Like India has pledged to reduce its emissions by 33% of its GDP, and also committed to establish or 450 gigawatts of solar, and also 33% enhancement in the carbon sink in the forestry sector. So these are the NDCs that we have agreed in the Paris Agreement. Maybe we will be increasing our NDC this time, and that is yet to be known. And so other countries, other developed countries have been setting up the net zero emission reduction targets. Like European Union has declared that they will be net zero by 2050. Now they are saying by 2040, and even the countries like New Zealand is leading in the net zero commitments. China has already committed, but it's also we need kind of a very short term, immediate milestones for achieving a long term targets. So what planners can do, like as planners or as different planners, transportation planners or urban planners can so we always work with the communities at the ground level. I believe we always look at the very micro level planning also in our studios. So how can we integrate a very informed kind of planning process in the urbans, in our cities, or uh, uh, in our rural settlements? So how can we integrate this climate change and hazard vulnerability assessment at the very local level? Because at the end of the day, we should ensure that all these international negotiations or all these national level policy dialogues translates into kind of a well-being or translates into kind of a capacity building of the people on ground. So that's how we always focus, or we should translate, we should focus on the community-centric strategies like very village-level disaster management plans and equipping the communities to respond to a disaster event through community civil defense or giving them awareness regarding what is happening around and how is it going to impact their lives and how can they adapt to these future scenarios. So even from a disaster management perspective or from a disaster management things, we should strengthen our alert systems. As we speak today, we don't have that much of a very proactive or a very efficient alert system in place. The Indian Meteorological Department (IMD) or the kind of weather alerts that we receive, we always see a lot of uncertainty. Like if we get a warning that it's going to rain heavily tomorrow in Vijayawada or in parts of Kerala, that's always not very true, or that's always not uh, been practical. Or maybe without a rainfall warning, we receive a torrential rainfall event, or whenever there is no warning, there used to be a heavy rain. And so there are gaps, technological gaps that we need to address. I'll move quickly. So when we look at the vulnerabilities, hazard vulnerabilities, we always talk on spatial uh, platforms. So I'll just take an example from Kerala, as we have worked there and the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority, where we have an integrated multi-hazard zonation map, also hazard-specific maps for each hazard. But before 2000 till 2018, we have always talked at the state level. We haven't downscaled further than the district level. So if we look at the state level map and see the districts, we cannot ascertain that like whether my household or whether my property is prone to flood or landslide uh, or other hazards. So these are the areas where planners can definitely pitch in to look at translating the kind of scientific information into a spatial platform. So after that, we downscaled it into the panchayat level from the district level to spatially to address the kind of to equip the panchayat officials or the people on ground to see whether their areas are under the flood vulnerable areas or not. So we talk about ecosystem-based adaptation, or how can we adapt to this climate change in a long-term basis. So we have to look at our surroundings and the kind of benefits that we get from the ecosystem-based adaptation. Let's take an example of mangroves, which protects us from the kind of coastal erosion and sea level and the cyclonic. Even the mangroves in Orissa and even in West Bengal have been successful in reducing the cyclonic impacts. So restoring and conservation of these mangroves also have a lot of core benefits in terms of in improving the blue carbon or improving the carbon sequestration, and also kind of a livelihood options for the communities. So it's also important how we communicate climate change to people on ground. So we have been following a lot of different mediums to uh, communicate climate change to people on ground. So this is something from Wayanad, where the coffee is the major crop there. Like coffee plantations are the major plantation crop in Wayanad. So these are the coffee flowers that bloom in the beginning of the season in February, and it will change into very blue, very green beans first. And coffee is such a thermosensitive crop which requires intermittent rainfall at particular stages and very particular temperature range for its maximum or optimum productivity. So these green beans will change into the red beans, and it's the most ripened beans, and it will be harvested and dried and grinded, as we see in the coffee shops. So we have seen certain areas in the plantation where both the red beans and the flowers of the coffee are seen. So in the same plant, so it's because of the season confusion that these plants or the crop experiencing because of the unpredictable rainfall that has seen in Wayanad region. So if kind of an untimely rainfall happens, and if and because of the temperature changes, the plant itself, we call it as a season confusion in technical terms. But we use this picture series as a kind of a medium to communicate climate change with the local farmers, explaining them that this is happening. And so the marginal farmers are really facing difficulties in terms of adapting to it if there is no rainfall happening at a particular stage. But large scale planters can always use sprinklers to make that artificial rain to adapt to that change of climatic seasons. So what we expect is an ideal scenario where everything is powered from renewables, and our public transport is very efficient, and we have an electric mobility feed. So how can we how can we do the decision making on development policies based on the emissions or based on the low carbon or the carbon footprint? So basically, when we talk about sustainable development, it was really vague and it was not quantifiable. So now, as in terms of GHG emissions or in terms of carbon footprint, we can quantify the kind of impact, the ecological impact that any policy or any project will have. Or at the same time, we can also quantify the kind of emission reductions that will be ascertained from the that will be achieved from implementing by a particular project. So as I told in the beginning, the transportation sector is also a major contributor to GHG emission. So switching to e-mobility is always an option for us, but at the same time, we should also ensure that the electricity is from not from the thermal power plants or not from the grids. So these are the challenges in front of us. So that kind of transition will also need the kind of transition in the infrastructure. And the other sectors being the waste management and also the other energy sector. The rooftop solar is the major off-grid rooftop solar will be the major source of power, clean power in our households. And even in the waste management sector, which is a very small contributor to GHG emissions, but how can we ensure that the decentralized waste managements are more in the practice? And we should also talk about the green jobs, where we will offer livelihood options for the communities and for the young professionals like us. What are the kind of opportunities in terms of building a career in this sector? And I'll share more resources in terms of the green jobs or the kind of evolving career options in this sector with Rajiv, and he can share it with you later. So in way forward, we have a lot of debate happening versus nature-based solutions versus engineering solutions. Let's say again taking an example of mangroves. So the immediate solution provider or immediate solution will be building a sea wall or a retaining wall along the coast, but that is in like investment oriented development. But do we that the question is, do that is that a kind of a sustainable option, or can we have nature based ecosystem based solutions? And also we always see that after a disaster there are a lot of relief promises or the relief kind of amounts that has been given by the governments, central governments or the state governments. So do we invest more before a disaster during the uh, preparatory phase or during the kind of like for mitigating the impacts? So as I said, as planners, we should always look at very people-centric, community-oriented policy interventions, and adaptation should be our key focus area. And as I said, as we all have our contribution towards climate action in terms of making our lifestyle decisions. So as youth, what we can do is something that we will look up. So as part of our project also, we are doing the kind of educative and competitive engagement with youth on climate change. The third edition is the competitions are live now. As Rajiv mentioned in the beginning, that you already had a competition for painting and videography and even for essay writing competition. We also have this kind of three competitions coming up. The deadline is 15th November. So that will be an engaging and very interesting sessions in the Youth Climate Conclave that will happen in next year, where we will have the youth from all around the country to interact on climate change issues and how can we contribute to climate actions and how can we support these climate actions at their own levels. So maybe I'll stop here for more questions and more interactions. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Nitin. So it was a very well structured presentation wherein you were discussing on aspects related to climate change, then followed by linking that with disasters that is happening. And you did give in a lot of examples with respect to what is happening in Kerala and how all you are trying to educate people also on such matters. Then you did talk about how GHGs are contributing to climate change and what is the role of this dialogue as such. Why is it necessary, and the global climate politics, and what should be the planners' focus? So there was a lot many things that were touched upon, and then finally you did also tell the students that what can the youth be contributing towards. Rather, there are some competitions also which you did tell. So thank you for sharing that link also on the chat box. So for everyone who is attending this session, the link has been shared. I hope that is for the competition, right, Nathan?
Yes, and for the conclave that will
Yes.
happen next year. Yeah.
So hopefully, few of our students, I think majority of them will be quite much interested to actively participate both in the conclave and also do contribute in the competitions. So with that, I open the session for questions to all the audience who is attending this session to Mr. Nitin.
I can see hands from
Yes,
Kalyani and
I think one Urbi and Kalyani has raised their hands. So maybe Urbi, you can go first.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Uh, good evening, sir. This is Urbi, and I'm from Department of Planning, specialization in environmental planning and management. So I had a question regarding wetlands.
Mhm.
So some people say that protecting wetlands without human interference is more beneficial than utilizing the wetlands for cultivation of rice these days. So what do you think on this?
See, there are, as I understood from the question, like, should we conserve wetlands or should we convert into rice cultivation?
Yeah, should we make it like utilize, I mean, put into utilization of those wetlands, or shall we preserve it?
So basically, there are two aspects to it. Like when we see a wetland or when we see kind of a marshy land, we consider it as a kind of a waste of resource or a waste of space. But they have their own ecosystem services, and the kind of land use changes that we have been doing, or that we have been proposing, or that we have been uh, developing based on our own logical reasons has been catastrophic already. From as a like from an individual opinion, uh, it's always better to conserve the wetlands as it is, and that will definitely contribute to more carbon sequestration in terms of in the kind of aquatic ecosystems that they already have, rather than converting into a kind of an agriculture practice or the paddy is not going to be sustainable. And it's also a very case to case basis. Uh, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So one more question.
Mhm.
Sir, do you feel that oceans, they have a much more, sequestration potential than lands?
Mhm. Yes, so the ocean acidification that we have been witnessing is because of all the sequestration that oceans are being uh, doing over the years. So acidification or the warming that ocean beds or the seabeds have been due to the sequestration of emissions, and the coral bleaching is also because of these changes in the ocean ecosystem. So they also have a limit to remove the carbon dioxide or remove the emissions, GHG emissions from the atmosphere. So yeah, we cannot rely on ocean's capacity up to like beyond the limit.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Urbi. Nitin, we have one more question from Ms. Kalyani. So, Kalyani, are you there on the call? You can pose your question.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm Kalyani from B Plan 4th year. I have two questions for you. The first one is that like tourism is a sector that really boosts the economy of an area, but it's also found to have a hand in pollution. So this is also a sector that gets affected by the negative effects of climate change. So,
Yeah.
do you think adopting the concept of adaptiveness is an effective solution for tourism sector to contribute in reducing the adverse effect of climate change?
I think that's a very interesting question because whenever we talk about adaptation or whenever we talk about community-based climate change adaptation, we see tourism as a potential alternative livelihood option for the communities. So, how can we ensure that it's not contributing further to climate change? Is something that the whole tourism industry or even a lot of discussions happening. So it's a concept. There is a concept of net zero tourism destinations, and there is a concept of low carbon tourism. So which is a kind of a responsible tourism or the next level of ecotourism, what we say. So that's where when we promote such destinations where we give them opportunity to the international travelers or the domestic travelers to look at their carbon footprint or look at their ecological footprint while making that holiday trip to that particular destination and giving them options to offset their emissions by maybe planting a tree or by investing in some kind of a project, the grassroots level projects that are uh, promoting low carbon energy systems to that community around. So there are a lot of discussions happening on that ground. So that's kind of a responsible tourism front, which is not affecting the area or not contributing to climate change. Yeah.
Sir, there is one more question.
Hmm.
Like as you may already know, like there are many places in Kerala, like Kerala,
Hmm.
where we have residential colonies as neighborhoods, which is
Hmm.
usually a cluster of 30 to 40 houses.
Yeah.
So, since electric vehicles and switching to solar energy, which is considered as the major step for achieving carbon neutrality,
Hmm.
since those kind of steps are a drastic change for now, like the residents of an area, do
Hmm.
you think the increasing the green pockets, promoting more terrace gardens and
Hmm.
improving the NMT and public transport and all can serve as the initial steps to achieve carbon neutrality?
Yes, I think definitely. It's basically self-sufficient neighborhoods or the self-sufficient households are the way forward for achieving carbon neutrality. If a particular neighborhood with 30, 40 households can survive without grid-supplied electricity by their own rooftop solar or by their own rainwater harvesting system for the water demands, and if they have charging infrastructure for their electric vehicles, then that's the way forward for achieving net zero at the community level and at the city level.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry. Thank you, Nitin. So, do we have any further questions from the participants? Anyone? Okay. So maybe we can keep the rest of the questions towards the end of the session. Yes. Good evening, sir. So we have with us Nitin. He has completed his first session, and we just completed our question answer session with him. Dr. Razak, sir.
Good evening, all of you. And I was busy. Some other program was there. I'm sorry, they are just joined now and continue. And we can go for the next presentation.
Yes, sir. We can go ahead with the next presentation.
Yeah, please.
So, with this, we come to the last portion of our first session, and Nitin has some engagements on his personal front with his project that he's handling. So he has to rush. Thank you very much, Nitin, for joining us for the day and addressing our young budding planners and architects on your perspectives towards climate change and low carbon cities or low carbon futures. Thank you, Nitin. So with that, we will move ahead, sir. We have our next speaker. So now we are moving into the alumni session, the alumni talks, rather the talks by our alumni from SPA Vijayawada, who are the other young planners whom we will be meeting today. So we have two alumni joining us today. One is Mr. Rahul Roy, and the second is Ms. Anusha Roy. So both are MEPM students. Rahul Roy is 2020 pass out. So Rahul, I hope you are there, right?
Good evening, sir. Yes, sir. I am here.
Yes, good evening, Rahul. So hope you're doing well. So we have all your juniors who are there and all faculty are there who have joined us, and we have other participants from outside as well. So just a quick introduction to our alumni, Rahul, who may be familiar with many of you who are there on this call. So currently, Rahul is working on a national project called National Seismic Risk Mitigation Project. So it's a World Bank funded project which is piloted in 9 states of India, consisting 4 states of Northeast and Northern states of the Himalayan region. So he's working with DDF, and DDF is working in this project in a JV with Aga Khan Foundation. And another project which he is involved with is the international case of field hospital and mega field hospitals established in response to COVID-19, which is the pandemic which is presently ongoing. And this project is funded by CDRI, and case studies consisting of geographical regions of America, Europe, Asia, etc. So that's a quick intro about Rahul, our alumni from SPA Vijayawada. Rahul, over to you for the alumni talk.
Thank you, sir.
Rahul, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good, sir. I'm good, sir.
Very
It's
good.
very
Thank
nice
you.
to be on the same platform again, sir. It's been a long time, and it was unfortunate that we had to depart, on being on online mode. But it really feels good to be back on the same platform, and I'm very happy and thankful to have this opportunity.
Okay, continue. You are all planners are waiting for your knowledge. Okay, sharing.
Yes.
Yes.
Sir. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, Rahul.
Yeah, you continue. Yeah, it's visible. Yeah.
Yeah. So today I'm going to talk about what we normally observe and feel being living in the city. So I have titled this as towards low carbon heat resilient cities. Before going to the next slide, I will just I will just pick up one point what one of the student in the previous presentation had pointed out, that having green patches in the cities, or maybe having solar panels, or is this the right way to go towards carbon neutrality? In my opinion, actually, these are not the mitigation strategies. These should be the part of life, and this is the only way we can see ourselves to reach carbon neutrality state, maybe in coming 20 years, or by 2050. What it has been envisaged by many European countries. So we'll try to in this discussion we will try to connect a few of the facts and what are the existing situation of our cities, our metros, what we have in our in our country. So first of all, why it is very much important to look after the cities to achieve our goal, what we have been envisaged to achieve this carbon neutrality, because if we talk about this current situation, more than half of the world population lives in city, and United Nations is expecting that by 2050 this will rise up to 2/3 of the population, which will be living inside the cities. So it is very important, the main thrust areas, the main impetus area should be the cities, because these are the areas where people are, coming from the rural areas, and because of the high flux of migration, the city is consuming a lot of energy. So city produces more than 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions such as CO2, methane, which are the key drivers of uh, increasing the heat and increasing the carbon content. So if we want to achieve this low carbon neutrality state, we must focus on the city areas. So I have listed few of these facts. So if you just talk about the facts here, urban heating could lead to 18.7 decrease in building heating energy consumption. This is a very interesting point, and one of the point is urban heating could lead to median of 19% increase in building cooling. Now there are two different facts. First says that due to urban heating, we can reduce the heating energy up to 18.7%. And another fact says that 19% of increase can be derived away if we are living in an urban heat state. So building can consume more energy, and it can lead to a rise of 19%. So now these 2 points are very contextual. If we talk about our country, which experiences more of a heat condition, so that too around the year, I think only 2 or 3 months wherein we feel we have this winter and we need more of urban heating. But nine among in a year, 9 months goes to an arena where we need more of a open and cooling energy consumption. So for the Indian context, what happens, 9 months we use more, we use the devices to keep our building system cool, and that is why it becomes very crucial for a country like India, where this energy consumption goes to 19% high. Now if you talk about some European countries where urban heating reduces the energy consumption, so definitely for those areas, if urban heat is working to lower their energy consumption, then it is more beneficial. So it's like two face of one coin. One where it is impacting in a negative sense, and one side says that it is impacting the right state. So I'll move on to the next slide. So I have listed few facts. So before going to the presentation, before going to the further discussion, we should be very clear that what does low carbon means. Low carbon means actually, it simply means having less generation of carbon dioxide, and which is like I had said before, it is a key driver of global heat gain and climate change. So if we just see one of this fact, that what has happened in past almost from 1960s to 2021, the CO2 concentration level has increased from 320 to 410. So it's more like we have increased the concentration by a margin of 100. And if we talk about the nations, per capita emissions by the nations, definitely India does not fall in top 15, but it is not much behind. The per capita CO2 emission is 1.91. I think 2-3 positions behind China, and definitely these wealthy nations, they are the main contributor of this CO2 emission. For a fact, if you see the global deviation of this annual temperature, what has happened over the century from 1850 to 2010 2021, so the deviation has increased by almost 1 degree Celsius, and that is why we have much talked about, we talk about Antarctica, melting of ice. So all these things are happening because of this increasing temperature. So these are the two scenarios which has been presented. If we adopt this mitigation strategy in our daily routine, we might end up having low end scenario, which still we will end up increasing 2 degrees Celsius of temperature over the decade. And if we do not follow these mitigation strategies in our daily routine, definitely we will be increasing by maybe 10 degrees Celsius, and it will make our cities very difficult to live and sustain around. So and not just the it is directly linked to the economy of the country. So this is the outcome of 3 models, and the least damage which we are having is at least 4 to 5%. And if you talk about the pessimistic, if we talk about the CRED model, the economic loss goes to 14%. It can move up to 14%. So basically, what point I wanted to make here is this heat gain in the city is the main driver of this carbon rise, and this is needed to be addressed. And there are two factors work here. So when as an architect, we are planners and architects, so how can we contribute? We can definitely our contribution goes to an area where we take these factors under consideration in our planning, while designing building, while making a building, taking consideration of the building envelope, what material are we choosing, and during the planning, what kind of planning are we adopting, whether we are leaving the enough recess area for the dissipation of heat. So I have just presented few more facts which is relevant, which is specific to India, that this heat surge, what we normally does not recognize as a disaster, but it has been called as a silent disaster by NDMA. Why it has been called a silent disaster? If you see, Indian heat wave have few of the facts which has been mentioned from the year 2019. Almost 6,167 people have lost their life in past 8 years, if you talk about span of 2010 into 2018. And it is something much more. The numbers are much more what we much anticipated disasters like earthquake or maybe cyclone. The kind of attention what we drive away to those disasters. But this is a silent one. We don't realize over the time what we're losing in terms of economic, in terms of social life, and definitely the loss of life. And and this heat gain is happening all over the world. It's not just India. It's just that India have already a heating condition, so it is more significant. But it is happening all over the world. And this urban heating, the heat surge has 2 drivers which acts simultaneously. One is heat wave, which is happening globally, which we have very less control over. It's like a disaster, natural disaster. And the second, what we defined as when the temperature goes the 98th percentile of historic temperature, we say heat wave. For India, it is defined as the temperature when it lies between 45 degree to 50 degrees Celsius. Then we call it a heat wave. So the another factor which is very much implied from from our planning perspective, what we say is urban heat island. So urban heat islands are generated due to our erratic planning. When we do not put much consideration to the soft areas, and we make all those areas paved and hard. So it gives very less room for evapotranspiration, and it increases the heat. So this slide is presenting few of the facts about particularly Delhi. So we can see that the heat index has increased by 0.6 degrees Celsius per decade. So it is huge. Increase of 0.6 degrees Celsius over the year of 10 years is something we should be very worried about. And one fact about I was just talking about urban heat island, that the last fact, if we see the intra-city ambient temperature, which is differentiating, the core of the city from the exterior of the city by zero point 0.2 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius. So we can now imagine if someone is living in an exterior area experiencing a temperature of maybe 40 degrees, and someone is living in the area of in the core area of a city, and they are experiencing a temperature of 43 degrees Celsius, and definitely these temperature rise drives away the cooling demand of the building, cooling demand of the society overall, and it increases. So what we do, what we use air conditioning systems, and then definitely and we use more refrigeration to be in our comfort zone, and definitely it drives away, it searches away the carbon dioxide level in the surrounding. So what I was saying, that this is the very basic and fundamental factor to increase to achieve this low carbon neutrality. One of more fact which I'm presenting here is that average heat index in summer and monsoon, which has increased, and the days what we experience which goes more than 40 degrees Celsius have increased. Like in the month of May in 2019, Delhi has experienced 11 days of which had temperature more than 40 degrees Celsius, and it went on to and it went on to 21 days in the month of June. So the overall scenario which is being presented here, it is directly telling that it is driving away, it is increasing the energy demand of the building overall, because ultimately we cannot sustain in a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Celsius throughout the day, and it demands more cooling energy. And this is the illustration of urban heat island. So what normally happens, in the rural areas, in the areas which are exterior open, when the sun rays gets reflected, and it does not traps any heat. Where in the city it gets trapped in, and it is just one of the illustration. The other illustration, if you see, it forms a dome kind of layer by this greenhouse gases, and it traps the heat inside it. So it remains very difficult and uninhabitable situation in the core of the city. This is one map which is showing heat wave effect of in India. This map belongs to 2015. So you can see majority of Indian continent has been experiencing of temperature of 48.8 degrees Celsius, which is huge, and it's just imagine if this heating condition is being added with urban heating effect. So the asphalt temperature might have gone to 50 degrees Celsius, and the cooling demand must have shoot up. So it is something which is needed to be, and it needed to be addressed, and it definitely creates a situation of vulnerability. Now I was talking about resilient cities. So resilience and vulnerability and adaptive capacity, it forms a triad. Vulnerability is defined as the function of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity, and it forms a triad. If the vulnerability goes up, the resilience capacity of the city goes down, and if the adaptive capacity increases, the resilience capacity of the city goes up. So it was to have a more focused understanding. A research was carried out, and it was carried out in the northeast district of Delhi, and the very first step was to see the land use change over the years. So these two maps are representing land use change in between 2009 to 19 over the span of 10 years, and we can visually see that built up area, how the built up area has increased and grabbed over all of the green patches over the years of 10 years, and a change matrix was calculated, and it was found that almost 8 square kilometer has been converted into built up areas, and these land use areas varied from water areas which were dried up, agriculture areas, green patches, and open paved areas, which converted into built spaces. So this particular research of mine had particularly 5 objectives, and a set methodology was created to evaluate the heat assessment of this particular district, and it was divided into 3 parts. The first part was to evaluate the thermal load of the particular district, and it had 8 sub parameters. The parameters varied from population density, because the more the population, the more there is anthropogenic heat. So these were the drivers of heat heat gain, and these were calculated these were overlaid to have this thermal load index map. So these parameters were population density, relative humidity, urban heat area index. So it is one of the index. Many people do get confused that it's a complete different mapping, but it's just an index like other one. Ambient air temperature, NTBI, you might be knowing, building index, vegetation index, and water index, and along with one very significant factor was albedo. Now, albedo comes into the play. Albedo is a very prominent factor when we talk about colors. If like we all have studied that the darker colors absorbs more light and it absorbs more heat. So the lighter color it reflects more of the light, and definitely when it reflects more of the light, it embodies less of heat. So these 8 parameters were overlaid to calculate this thermal load index map. And then, because vulnerability is something which has a very clear cut relationship with adaptive capacity. So even if I'm sitting in a country maybe like UAE, where the temperature goes 50 degrees Celsius, but I'm good enough to afford that, I can be in the living condition, my adaptive capacity goes high and I won't be vulnerable. So particularly to assess this particular area of adaptive capacity, there were 10 sub parameters which were chosen from the census, and these varied from population age to water availability, sanitation facility, household assets, building roof material, literacy, gender, electricity. Now you might be thinking that what this literacy and electricity has to do here, household assets has to do here. So I'll just give you a brief outline. First of all, if you talk about population age, so if you talk about people of having age less than 5 years, or maybe older people, so they have their inner body capacity to bear something goes down, and that is why it becomes a very prominent factor if there is an assessment of adaptive capacity. Water availability becomes one of the another very important factor, because with more heat you lose more of energy, and water is something which recharges you. Sanitation facilities, household assets. So these are the indicators which are somewhere indicating about the economic welfare of the particular family, and these are assessed to come out with the adaptive capacity of the particular household. And these were multi-layered to have this social vulnerability index, and these two thermal load index mapping and then social vulnerability index mapping, which were layered together to form urban heat vulnerability mapping. But what do we do? I mean, okay, fine, we get urban heat vulnerability mapping. So to further analyze, a study was done on choosing one of the neighborhood where physical composition of the particular neighborhood, climatic indicators, and then perception indicators were assessed to finally come out with the mitigation strategies. So I'll just go to the exposure parameters. So these exposure parameters, these are population density, humidity, ambient temperature, and they were calculated using Landsat 8 data, and it was further classified into ranking, having some logic. Logic varied from taking guidelines taking from URDPFI and to ASHRAE, which is American Society, and to ISO 77, which recommends the standard values of comfort, human thermal comfort. So it categorizes the whole district into 5 different ranks. So which will clearly let you know that which are the areas having high scores and low scores, which is definitely can be implied into the low temperature and high temperature. Similarly, few of the biophysical parameters were analyzed. These biophysical parameters were building index, vegetation index, and water index. So we can clearly see that building index, the whole district is filled with the red patches. If we talk about the upper map, it definitely shows that the district had a very high dense pattern and a very low vegetation area. So these high build pattern and low vegetation area definitely do directly affect the heat gain of the city, and it again it applies to discharging more carbon into the surrounding. Now the last two parameters were urban heat island. So finally urban heat island was created, and it was spotted out which are the areas which are creating the heat pockets inside the district, and then albedo mapping was created. In order to understand that which are the areas which are reflecting the light and which are the areas which is absorbing the light, and then a correlation was carried out to understand the relation between relation of these parameters to heat, and it was obvious that building index, ambient temperature, population density, humidity, albedo, these will be having a positive relation, and whereas vegetation index and water index shows a negative relation. So it can be definitely implied that if you want to achieve this carbon neutral state in a city, you need to increase this vegetation areas, green areas, and then water bodies, which will provide this thermal comfort inside the city, which reduces the your cooling energy demand. If we talk about the social parameters, in order to achieve this social vulnerability map, 10 different parameters were used. Like I had said, population having age 6 years or below, or population having age more than 60 years, female population, household having piped water, and then these were again classified from rank 1 to 5, from very low vulnerability to high vulnerability, and finally a thermal load map was created. I'm audible, right?
Yes, Rahul, you're audible.
So finally, making all the having this thermal load mapping and the social vulnerability mapping, finally urban heat map was created, and it was found that 73% of the district were more high vulnerable to heat in the district. So now having a thought, 73% of the district of the area of the district is having very high high heating load, and these areas contributing to a high needing a very high cooling demand. So like I said, further it was analyzed to a neighborhood level, and this neighborhood was analyzed on the basis of compactness per capita green. So particularly if I talk about this particular district has the lowest per capita green in the entire country. It goes to 1.6 square meter per person, whereas Delhi normally averages 41 square meter per person. It is even below to one of the Mumbai, which is having the lowest green areas in the city, but this district has even lower, which is 1.6. And the microclimatic analysis was these were the simulations which was used based on sky view factor, roof radiation, and radiation in urban Kent. So we can see that these are all the values are going to the red zone, and these are the contributing factors of heat. And then a sun part diagram, windrows diagram, and then a few analyses were done based on questionnaire to understand the perception of the residents living over there. And finally, finally a matrix was prepared in terms of highly desirable and moderate condition of all these physical parameters, microclimatic parameters, and perception parameters, relating with the standard values. So now we talked about we got to know that okay, 73% of the district lies in a very high heat zone and they were much vulnerable. But what to do? So as a mitigation strategy, there were different strategies were adopted. Few strategies were plot level, few strategies were at the district level, and then there were few policy level. So if we talk about plot level, if you see this middle portion where there were different building forms were showing. So it was very necessary to have this angle to be more wider to dissipate the heat. So there were some policy level recommendation were suggested where we can the upper floors can have lower coverage so that it opens up the area to which can dissipate the heat, and this can be adapted to existing condition. Then definitely building envelope does matter to a lot, and building materials as an architect people should be looking after. And a suitability analysis was done to identify which are the areas which is necessarily needed to be green, like the areas around schools, the areas around hospitals, and few street level, plot level, and then district level strategies were prepared. And last a framework was developed, like how to respond during the heat waves. So it was divided into three parts: pre-heat waves, during the heat waves, and post-heat waves. So what should be done before the heating condition, because this heating condition gets enhanced during the heat wave. So a strategy was framed, dividing the whole situation into three parts. And institutional framework was emphasized to how to actively act during the situation of such events. So I think this is all from my side, and we are open for the questions if someone has.
Thank you, Rahul. So it was a very good presentation, and I'm happy that you did share your ideas and what you did for thesis also with the participants, is that they also get interested to look into such interesting topics for research. So if you don't mind, Rahul, we can keep the question answer session together with Anusha, such that we can club the session and we can close it almost on time, as we are at 5:30 now.
Yes.
So thank you, Rahul. So I hope you will be there with us till almost 6 once Anusha is also done, and then we'll take the question answers together.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Rahul, you can stop presenting as well. So now it's already 5:30. So we have one more speaker with us on this alumni talks, who is Miss Anusha. Anusha is our environmental planning batch 2017-19 batch, senior to Rahul's batch. From environmental planning and management, and she's presently doing her research on long-term analysis on surface heat island using geospatial techniques from the remote sensing department of IIT Bombay. She's a PhD scholar there. So Anusha.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Anusha. Welcome.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm doing good, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm going well. So you can start your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yes, yes,
This is
Anusha.
actually a part of my PhD presentation. Sorry, my master's thesis also. So I was quite interested in how green and blue spaces around our city helps in reducing the temperature in the urban areas. So that is how I ended up doing a thesis also during my master's, and I'm continuing the same for my PhD project also. So since in line with how a low carbon future should be provided to the urban areas, so that is how I thought like how our green and blue infrastructure can be a part of low carbon future. So, what the benefit of this green and blue infrastructure is that it gives a nature-based solutions to problems related to health, be it climate change or adaptation or even mitigation, as well as urban resilience. So, it's actually a very the nature-based solution is actually a very big urban. I mean, it's actually a very big umbrella under which green and blue infrastructure is a very small part of it. So I mean, initially just to refer like what a green and a blue infrastructure is. So whatever you see, like the definition, there is no of full and final definition for green and blue infrastructure. However, what commonly people use is like the green elements could be termed as the green elements in this. In our environments, such as trees, forests, parks, fields, etc., is termed for green infrastructure, and blue would be again the water bodies and wetlands, floodplains. So, the green blue infrastructure actually presently what happens is there are two terms. One is green infrastructure, another is green and blue infrastructure. So that depends from place to place. So when we look into studies that have been conducted in UK and all, they call it as green infrastructure. Even the blue water bodies and everything come under that green infrastructure. So the definition changes from places to places. But however, the main intention of giving a green blue infrastructure in any region is actually to solve problems related to mostly the urbanizing sector, as well as climatic challenges that we are facing due to this increased urbanization. So, how can it be? How can it contribute to a low carbon future? So, first is like it can help in reducing the greenhouse gas emission, because, of course, planting more trees or putting more water bodies around, giving cooling environment can actually help in reducing the water resources. I mean, not just water resources, but the other natural resources and the associated energy. Secondly, of course, the carbon sequestration that is happening through these elements, and then helping the adverse effect of climate by managing flood risk, mitigating the urban heat islands, and reducing the drought risk. So now, in terms of India, when we look into green blue infrastructure being implied into the master plans or action plans, we have Delhi, Bhopal, Madurai, and Bangalore. Till now, these are the cities which have actually incorporated blue and green infrastructure into their master plans or in their action plans. So some of the examples that they have done is like Master Plan 2041 for Delhi says that they have run 50 nalas around Delhi, which would be cleaned up, and then around that 50 nalas they would be creating a buffer zone which would act as a green corridor. So these green corridor could be used for any recreational purposes like yoga or open air theaters, community vegetable gardens, etc. Another, the city of lakes, Bhopal. So there they have actually separate plans for blue and green infrastructure in the city. So they call it as green and blue master plan. And how they have done is like the main intention providing this master plan is to see how the green cover has influenced citizens' health and lifestyle. And then they have initiatives such as sustainable water management, then making all green buildings along the cities, waste management, recycling, and everything. And then in case of Madurai, so they have plans for water plants and water walks. So in order to connect people to these green and blue spaces. So that's how different cities have taken up green and blue infrastructure as a part of their master plans and action plans. So just will not take much time. I'll be discussing what I did for my thesis in SPAV. So my case area was Navi Mumbai. So main aim why I did was because since we know that green and blue infrastructure provides multiple benefits. So the main benefit that I took from was how to provide cooling effects in the urban areas, because there was in a 20-year span there was 2 degree Celsius difference that was already seen in case of Navi Mumbai. So that is how I thought of, because that is an area where you still see urban green covers, but still the extension to which urban heat extended was something not above the normal level. So this was reason for selecting Navi Mumbai for my research. And how I did was a spatial analysis for this entire area, segregating all the build spaces, the green and the blue spaces, and then what are the factors that influence the climate in that region. And then based on those factors, a climate map was developed. And then the climate map actually helped in identifying what are all the hotspots or what are all the critical areas, the bottleneck areas that has to be developed. And then the final, based on those areas, planning decisions, what should be the planning decisions. So again, this Navi Mumbai came into inception as an extension of increase in the urban land cover in Bombay. The land was not sufficient to provide all shelter to the people who are residing in Mumbai. So that is how the concept of converting a marshy land, that was Navi Mumbai, to a proper planned settlement. So I took a part of Navi Mumbai, which falls under the Navi Mumbai Municipal Corporation. So this was a particular my study area, which again there is a natural. This was the MIDC, that is the industrial belt in my study area, and then it was again the land cover was the natural land cover followed. There was a mountain, there was a ridge on this side. So this act as a natural and which actually gave my study area a benefit of all the natural elements. And still, what was the reason for an increase in temperature? So now the methodology is involved for my study included like how what were the existing condition of the green and blue infrastructure. So what I did was located various infrastructure, the green and the blue infrastructure in my study area, and then categorized what is the size of it, what is the area, and how much intensity it is, and then what were the factors that led to the linkage of urban climate and the green blue infrastructure. And based on that, 2 maps were created. That was the thermal load map and dynamic potential map. So thermal load map basically was to deal with all the factors that leads to heating in that region, and dynamic potential were the factors that lead to the cooling in those areas. Then various theories and concepts were again merged together to finally develop a climate map based on what are the factors and what are the weightages to be given to different factors, and then to one of the most affected zone from the climate change or from the urbanization. A particular area was considered, and then a simulation was performed to see how things have changed. For example, how simulation effect, how things have changed over year, and then if we propose certain policies, how is them gonna affect the further future. So then this was the part of my data analysis. So the first map here we see is actually covering all the green and the blue areas in my city. And then, so the various factors included for the climate, the changing climate were considered. So first of them was vegetative cover, and then the water index and the LST. So what I did was prepare all these maps for different years and saw how it changed over years. And then for one particular year, that was 2018, was considered, and then how ranking was given to each of the factors that was taken. For example, vegetative index, which shows how much green a particular area is, and then other factors like topography, population density, air temperature, built index, prevailing wind, and these all factors were then correlated with the LST. That how much correlation, how are they related to how much what is the extent of their relation to the land surface temperature change. And this was that done, and for each of these factors, parallelly, what I did was like scale, ranking was given, and then finally two maps were developed. That was the thermal load and the dynamic potential. And for people who don't know about Navi Mumbai much, so the entire Navi Mumbai is a planned city settlement, and this is entirely divided into different nodes. So there are around 7 nodes that comes under my study area, and of which the node 4, that is Vashi, is one of the most affected by the thermal. The thermal load map. So the thermal load. The most heating areas was considered to be Vashi, even after having a good green cover in its vicinity and everything, but still it was having more heat generated. Similarly, if I see, like, Vashi was again an area where we have low dynamic potential, that is a cooling potential in the city. In this particular node was quite low. So these two maps were integrated to form urban climate dynamic map, that is the urban climate map for my study area. And it was then further, I selected this one particular zone and developed a environment map. Environment simulation was done to check on how the temperature is. All the mentioned, like temperature, the wind, the surface cover, the buildings, and everything was stimulated again to give a temperature map. And it was seen that like there were various nodes. Like if you see into this map, the current the shades in dark orange, violet, pink, these were the areas where a lot of work has to be done in terms of reducing temperature. So how they did was one thing that we noticed was along all the the road networks, we see heavy red color or the violet color, which shows heavy heat load being generated in these areas. So what was to be focused was how this has to get decreased. So then the intervention was categorized into 6 different terms. That was protective, to protect the landscape, which was already well functioning; defensive, in terms to defend the landscape that was suffering from any developmental pressures, and then offensive, like taking how to reintroduce a particular function where they do not exist. So again, then opportunistic means like finding what are the, like, how we do it in SWOT analysis. Like we find out what are the places where we can improve the green and blue infrastructure, and then resilience is like developing the most viable economic measures for the resilience in the system. And then finally, like once we are set up with all the steps that has to be followed, how are we gonna look like if these measures has to be taken, will be considered or not. So I'm not going to explain everything in detail. Like you can have a look at my thesis; it would be kept in the library. So it was just a brief of how things were done. So what we saw is what the measures that the proposals that I had given. We did again a simulation, and it was seen that there was a total decrease of 2-degree temperature. And in urban settlements, like a good amount of changes were seen in terms of temperature. So the proposal again, this was a particular sheet showing all the proposals that I had done. Like there was a expressway along this node, so plantation of having a green cover alongside this expressway and protecting all the existing green resources, and the areas which were actually left out, barren spaces, again plantation in dense plantation was proposed, then rooftop plantation was proposed in multiple locations. And then connecting, one of the important measure is what we consider while designing a green and blue infrastructure in a city is connecting different spaces, because that is how you are able to extend the influence of the green and blue infrastructure to different parts. So there could be a different patch of green infrastructure that has to be connected via a green or a blue network. For example, what Delhi Master Plan is proposing right now is like connecting all the nalas with a green belt, and then connecting it to the neighborhoods. That is what it is, again, an important part. So this was done, and then finally it was seen like how improving the green and blue infrastructure in our study area can actually lead to a decrease in temperature, and finally, again, which again contributes to in having this having green and blue infrastructure structure also helps in reducing the carbon, carbon that has been that has been acquired into the environment. So this is, I mean, what I would like to share with all of you. So,
Thank you, Anusha. Yes, yet another very nice presentation. It's been almost 2 years since we heard you presenting. Now, again, it's our opportunity to speak and listen to you as now a speaker in our webinar. So good having you here, Anusha, and thank you for sharing your research ideas as well. So with this, I invite our head of the Department of Planning of SPA Vijayawada and the chief coordinator for this Urban October 2021 to address the gathering. Sir?
Okay, thank you, Rajiv. And once again, I'm so happy to see all of you take part in the Urban October 2021 at SPAB. All of you know that the three speakers trying to highlight how important today in city planning. So where they were trying to connect all the heat islands and green and blue areas. It's all, it's not new, but we are taking it as a new idea to be seen from the planning perspective. So where I just connect these, all the ideas into, start with the nature loss and climate change. It is a crisis. There are two sides of the same coin. The two are intrinsically linked and reinforce each other. So that's what, you all understand that. Climate change is one of the main drivers of biodiversity and ecosystem services loss. Even under the, the 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade global warming scenario, ultimately what is the loss of nature contributed to the climate change. So cities are the melting pot for various reasons. We know what cities now we are facing from last 100 years. Still, some things are continuing. But now what is added is climate change. They are responsible for something about 70% of global carbon dioxide emission with what is the urban sector, what we are concerned about, transport, building, energy and waste management, and so on. This is the bulk of urban greenhouse emission accounts for that. What's happening today around the world? City leaders are trying to take real and meaningful action towards commitments towards the low carbon future. That is what the theme we are discussing about today. So when I say that transport, building, energy, and waste management, and also what is the kind of efforts towards the net zero energy efforts, which makes building healthier and more comfortable. Carbon-free cities can provide more efficient and economic options that are tailored to different transport needs. Now the transforming electricity generation to carbon-free renewable energy. Also, we know that industry is a major employer and economic drivers of many global cities, which significantly shaping the city's carbon emissions. So cities are now shifting from flow and management of their biological resources, the natural wealth, to reduce emission, capture carbon, and provide other benefits to the city. So they are trying to create or expanding, not just only in terms of technology, but we need to have financial options. It matters cities at the forefront of climate change risk. So what they are trying to do, they committed. The cities are committed. They are coming closer to see how decarbonized, and also trying to say that how to push or how to integrate climate neutrality. That's what the concept which you're all reading from. I would like to say that nature is needed in cities. Once it was a nature place, nature area. Now we are transforming into cities of hard surface, heat islands, and trying to see that how green and blue areas are vanishing, and now we are again reinforcing on green infrastructure. So that's the way I look at that. There is a need in terms of nature in cities because it enhances human health and well-being in many ways. And if we plan cities that are desirable to live in, then we will say it is well-being. So why people try to move to a place where it gets cool in summer, hill stations, resorts. They're trying to jump from the cities to other places to go for a living. Why not we create a desirable living environment? This is what now today people talk about, or the experts talk about the city attractiveness, not just in terms of money, investment in infrastructure, but creating a good living environment, houses and neighborhood. This is what I just recently published in one of the journal in Paris. Then I would like to highlight on that when we're talking about this particular phenomena of carbon free, low carbon future, it is livelihoods, improving livelihood in cities, not just decreasing our carbon footprint and shifting consumption patterns, but we have to readdress this appropriate impact on this climate change. So well-being and resilience, both futures heavy in terms of policy decisions. A more inclusive understanding about this concept is important today, interconnecting them. Simply narrow focus on achieving resilience and well-being is not sufficient. It has to be focused on locally and oriented toward the future. So for that, we need a strong civil society effort. Climate action that is environmentally and socially is just require a vibrant civil society, the public participation, the neighborhood level, even in the household level. And you can create green and blue in your house. Why to talk about all water bodies and forest? So the vibrance of civil society driving, leading and pushing for change and being able to hold the decision makers accountable to the promises. We know that the promises are made by the local government, election, before the election, after the election. Forget about election. Development, when they are trying to do a master plan, is also a kind of a force which we're trying to see that how city can be made livable and workable and economic and everything you're talking about. So now, last point for of you to understand that today we are into the second day of COP26. All of you familiar with that as the the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which is taking place in the place like Glasgow. So the UK is trying towards to high impact climate action to deliver on the promises of the Paris Agreement. The world leaders, national delegations, representative business, civil society, youth, all gathered to tackle climate crisis. But the last point is the value of nature to people and planet is important. So one of the particular program focus on this topic, which is going to be there on November 5th in Glasgow. They even will discuss how nature loss, I started with that, I told you in the beginning, nature loss is a socio-economic and development issue, not just only reducing carbon or the pollution and everything. And how it is linked to the climate change, as well as find out the pathways to undertake both nature and climate smart development. That is what now they are trying to focus on the day of number 5, 24, fifth day, number 5. So which includes through expanding our economic, not just only the GDP, sorry, but it should be account for the wealth provided by the nature. So this is the natural wealth, how to protect and live along with the nature. That is what the value of nature to be brought into the people. The people should understand the value of nature and the planet, which is important for our survival. So anyway, it is very well presented by both all three, Nitin and Anusha and Rahul, which their experience, how they have undergone the research, and now in a new perspective after research, they are working now, and then the presentation is different because they are now into the subject and then understand that, and also further doing research and work. But that's what our interest is, to see that all of you get oriented and get an idea that how we can perceive a topic of a environmental subject or planning subject or urban regional planning or transport. But it is important for us to see that how these are the platforms which can be helpful for us to access to these kind of new thinking and knowledge based discussions are more important. That's what we decided this, and with the full support of the Raju sir, and then also we are moving towards further programs also happening for this particular event, the urban October. So we look forward to all of you to benefit. And on 8th also we have 2 sessions will be conducted. One of the things we focus mainly on how we remember or come together and talk about the World Town Planning Day, which I'm trying to find out some speakers from different countries. And in the process of finalizing the speakers, then we will let you know that, and then we will have another 2 hours interaction with international experts. Hopefully, it will be a successful program, and all of you also will take part, and more other people also will take part. Okay, over to Rajiv. Thank you for this little sharing my knowledge.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your comments, and it was quite much enlightening to us with all those points that you had covered regarding the ongoing current events that is going on at as a part of COP26. So with that, we come to the end of the session, and we have closed and we have completed the alumni talk session as such. We are open for questions, and if at all any participants has any questions to our speakers, then you are feel free to ask, please. Anyone? Any participant having any questions to our speakers? They are our alumni only, and they very well know the background that you are coming from in the field of architecture and planning. So you can feel free to ask them any questions, if at all you have pertaining to the topics that has been discussed today or the larger umbrella of low carbon futures. Any participant? Yes, Vishakha.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have 2 questions. The first one is the common concern in planning is like urbanization and related to urban sprawl. So recently we all know about the concept of compact city. So it speaks about high rise, high density construction. So as per the presentation, and we all know, like urban heat island are mostly concentrated in the core urban areas. So my question is, how can we, while implementing this compact city concept or high density mixed use concept, how can we balance so that the natural asset of the city is not getting harmed while implementing such concepts? And second question is Ms. Anusha Roy. Like the concept of integrating blue and green is something new, but what are the challenges while implementing this blue and green concept, especially like when she spoke about like from proposals related to rooftop greening? So there are already existing buildings there. So what are the challenges while we come up with such solutions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vishakha. Anusha and Rahul, the floor is yours. Maybe one of Rahul, would you like to go first and give the answer? Yes, Anusha is there with us. Anusha, yes, please.
Okay. Uh, with one second. So, like you said, you asked what is the main problem.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, Rahul. So Anusha is just giving her part of the answer, and then maybe we can come back to you.
So, Vishaka, when it comes to what are the problems in implementing green and blue infrastructure, is like getting that into the policy itself is a big deal. It's like we can propose because we have researches which tells about how things have changed, but then explaining that to the municipal corporations or to the any local government bodies, it is actually, and putting that in as a part of policy becomes difficult. So now when we have concepts such as smart city concept, or like now livable city concepts, so these could actually be a part of that. Separately, having a much focus only on green or blue infrastructure becomes difficult. So yeah, putting that into paper or convincing the local government is a big deal. So why I am able to explain this, because with my proposal, I had words with the government officials in Navi Mumbai, but then yes, they again are, they would be partially willing to accept the proposal or not, because otherwise if we put it in a larger umbrella where the schemes can be put into umbrella or something like that, then things becomes much easier. Thank you. I think
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Anusha. Rahul? Hello? Rahul? I think Mr. Rahul Roy is having some network connectivity issues. So maybe we can hold his question for the time being. Do we have any further questions from the participants? Yes, Rahul is there with us.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Rahul, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, sir, I was disconnected for a moment. I think I would like to hear the question one more time. In a brief, sorry.
Shakha, can you please repeat the question?
Yes, sir. So my question was, since in urban planning we are already concerned about urbanization and urban sprawling, so we are promoting concepts, cities like compact city concepts, which is more into high density construction, so that it will reduce the travel distance and promoting public transportation. But while implementing this such concept, since we saw like urban heat island are more seen into the urban core areas, where we can see the high rise buildings and high density areas. So while implementing such concepts, how can we balance or how can we ensure that the natural assets within the core areas are not getting damaged? And how can we preserve that while implementing such concepts? Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, see, again, I would say this is the high compact cities is not the desirable concept. It is something which has evolved as the need of the hour. So when we adopt something as a strategy of the need of the hour, it comes with the pros and cons. It definitely has benefits, like it will impact more population in a less area. It will have some impact on urban sprawling, but definitely it is going to increase the heat demand of the building, energy demand of the building. The more density will be there, there will be high energy demand. So the balance lies in creating the most which what can be done, the least can be done in such scenario is to create those areas, maybe like we can use efficient materials, efficient materials, or maybe the streets which we can leave as not we do not cover them as a hardscape. We leave them as softscape, so that evapotranspiration can happen more as much as can possible. So the balance lies in adopting new strategies which are more efficient, building material which are more efficient, planning neighborhood planning, such as giving green pockets inside the in between these high areas. Having high multi-rise buildings definitely going to having high density, but it is going to give you some land which can have totally green pockets. So the least we can do is to adopt such lifestyle which can enhance the softscape of the area. And because this is a concept which has come as the need of the hour. It is not an ideal situation, but definitely if we have to adopt it, we have to come up with some changes in our daily lifestyle and in the planning strategy to make the more softscape rather than going for the hardscape.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Vishakha, for the question. Any other participant would like to pose any questions? Any participant? Okay, so if we have any further questions, maybe we can take it. You can email to me and I can post it to the respective speakers. And also we can make the email IDs of our young speakers to you, such that you can contact them directly if at all you want to understand anything further about the topics that was discussed today under the umbrella of low carbon futures. So with that, I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks for the event that we are conducting today, the webinar that we are holding. So under the Urban October 2021, which SPA Vijayawada is celebrating, we are planning to celebrate the World Habitat Day, the World Architecture Day, World Cities Day, and the World Town Planning Day. And I thank Honorable Director of SPA Vijayawada, Professor Dr. Meenakshi Jain, for undertaking this particular cause and supporting in the coordination and in the celebration of Urban October at SPA Vijayawada. So the entire range of events that has been planned under Urban October 2021, as I've already explained, aims to bring together the students of architecture and planning professionals, academicians, and researchers to think and deliberate on matters of sustainable development. Today, we had the webinar on low carbon futures, and I thank our head Department of Planning for helping us meticulously throughout identification of the speakers to preparation of the agenda for this session, etc. And I thank all the faculty of Department of Planning who have been helping us with the rest of the arrangements for the programs, for the workshops, etc. And the students for being very patient listeners and also posing very interesting questions. But more than all this, with today's session, I would like to specifically thank our speakers, Mr. Nidhin, who is a junior technical expert at GIZ India. And then we had with us a PhD scholar from IIT Bombay, our own alumni, Ms. Anusha Roy. And then we had Mr. Rahul Roy, assistant manager at DDF, our next alumni. So I thank all three speakers. And with that, that's the closing remarks for today. But yes, this is not the end, but this is just a start for or the opening for the Urban October 2021 that we are celebrating at SPA Vijayawada, the online event that we had. As a part of that, already all the students might have received the posters regarding the three competitions that we are organizing at SPA Vijayawada under the umbrella of Urban October 2021 at SPAV. So the first competition is essay writing competition with the theme Accelerating Urban Action for Carbon-Free World. The second competition is a painting competition, and the third is a video making competition. So all the instructions, I hope, are very clear on the posters that we have circulated to the various class groups. We have our submissions portal open till 3rd of November, further which we will be scrutinizing the applications we have received. All the participants will be receiving an e-certificate, and there will be exciting cash prizes also. So please do actively participate. This is to all the students who are attending today's session. In addition to the competitions for the students and the webinar that we've held today, as Razak sir had already pointed out, we have 2 more sessions next week. Same Monday, from morning till evening we do have. Morning we have a workshop with experts from all across India, from the field and academicians, on the title of Carbon Free World and Climate Resilience. That will be from 10 o'clock in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, followed by which we have the celebrations of World Town Planning Day in the evening, wherein as Razak sir had already told, wherein we'll be having international speakers joining us from US, Canada, etc., who will be sharing their thoughts and perspectives from the Western countries as a part of the World Town Planning Day celebrations. And with that, we'll be closing the Urban October 2021 celebrations at SP Vijayawada. So thank you for joining us today, to everyone who is there on the call. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Anu sir and Rahul for your valuable time and sharing your knowledge with your friends. And also thanks to Raju for successfully conducting this webinar, and all our students, friends, for participating and got some good takeaways today's discussions. Hopefully it will be benefit to you. Thanks one and all. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Thank you all, and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.